Hello there, I am out here testing the Nikon D800 and D700. I already set up my tripod and taken some shots. Here's the D700 and the D800 I also have here ready to switch. Now this location, it seemed like a good idea, but now when I'm here, like regretting my decisions. Should have gone somewhere much easier. But there are plenty of colors around here, and that's primarily what I want to test. Like how the colors compare between the D800 and D700. When looking at the specifications between these two cameras, the biggest difference you can see is of course the resolution. The D700 is 12 megapixel while the D800 is 36. So you can like fit 3 D700 photos into one D800. Yeah, but of course that's not the most interesting thing that we know. Like, yeah, it has much more megapixels, the 800. I'm mostly interested in comparing the colors, but of course the dynamic range and also the high ISO noise performance is interesting as well. So I have done a few tests like this before, like between CMOS and CCD sensor cameras, between the D200 and the D700, and my results were actually kind of boring because in like low ISOs there was not much of a difference between the cameras. Also between like Canon 30D and Nikon D200 there isn't that much of a difference. I've been trying to keep everything consistent in my tests. I have used the same lenses and also the same settings and using the same editing program, trying to keep the light as well the same as much as possible. And the one thing I've been a bit sloppy with is a tripod, but today I have a tripod set up. On my previous videos I got some comments that the differences between the D200 and D700 are not so big because of the color filter array, because at some point, like after 2010 or so, or around that time, the color filter array, which is in front of the photodiodes in the sensor, was made a bit thinner to improve the low light performance. Now the downside of this is that the color signal reaching the sensor would not be as good as before when using a thicker color filter array. So that's one reason I've seen that the difference is not that big between the D700 and D200 when it comes to colors in low ISOs. And I'm emphasizing the low ISOs because in high ISOs there you definitely see a difference because there's much more noise on the CCD sensor cameras. Now the D800 is from 2012 and the D700 from 2008. So if there is some truth to this color filter array thing I've been hearing, it should be possible to see it between these two cameras, but I would not be surprised if the result again is the same like between the D200 and D700, that you don't see much of a difference. But in any case, I have shot some photos so far. I will shoot some more, and then I will come back when I have some results to report on. So I suppose I should start by confessing my sins. I ended up ditching the tripod rather quickly, even though I said I would use it in my test. I had it in the first scene, but then yeah, it became a bit in the way, and instead I tried to line up the shots as well as I could. I mean, the viewfinders are not exactly the same on the two cameras, so they might not be exactly the same, but for this test I don't think it's the most important thing that the photos are like lined up perfectly. I mean, the colors is primarily what I'm interested in. So how did the test go? Are there any differences between the D700 and the 800? Well, there are some small differences. I mean, what I did is basically to, well, apply the same edits to RAW files, and the D700 files turn out to be a bit brighter, and the colors are also a bit more red. Now, the first test photos I shot were outdoors, of course. You can't tell by the pictures, I suppose. And since the light could have changed between these shots, I also decided to take some photos indoors with the same light. And actually this confirmed like the same thing, the same result. Now, the difference between the cameras are not actually that big. I mean, just with some small edits I could well, make the photos look the same, like increase the exposure and put a bit more magenta, make it a little bit warmer. I mean, with those changes I could make the D800 photos look basically the same as the D700. So at least based on this test I cannot determine that the color performance is any better on the D700, or that it would capture a better color signal. Maybe if you put these files into a bit more advanced RAW editor, then you could point out the differences more accurately. But at least to the process I shoot my photos according to, I cannot like see any like advantage of the D700 when it comes to colors. And then we have the high ISO performance, and there you can see a difference. Like the D800 photos have maybe one stop less noise than the D700. And also I noticed that the noise on the D800 looks much better than the D700. It kind of reminds me of the noise on the D200, with the big exception that on the D200 you would like use ISO 1600 to get this level of noise, while on the D800 you can have like you would have to use the highest like 25,000 to get similar levels of noise. Yeah, but in any case, the noise on the D700 is much more like dirty looking or spotty looking. There are bigger clumps and smaller clumps, and also there is quite a lot of banding like on the D700, especially with bright light sources. Of course this can be used for effect as well, so it's not like a necessarily bad thing. But if you want like clean output from a camera, then you wouldn't want this type of banding. And then of course we have the resolution, which, like, surprise surprise, is much higher on the D800, and you can clearly see this in the photos. Like, you have a lot more pixelation on the D700 files, and for landscape shots, like when you use a longer lens, I mean, the D800 definitely has an advantage. Like, you get much nicer detail. Yeah, which is of course totally expected. So overall my results of this test is that the D800 has better image quality. Like, surprise surprise, I guess. And do I really need to do a test to confirm that? Well, at least for my own photography, it's at least good to know what you can do with each camera, how they perform, and so on. Now, the only thing I did not get a clear idea of is the dynamic range. I mean, the scenes that I shot didn't have that much like difference in tones, so yeah, but I suppose the D800 should be slightly better when it comes to that. So I guess the interesting question here is, will I ditch the D700 because of these results? Well, I suppose not, because I'm also using a D100, D200 for taking photos. So, I mean, just based on image quality, I would not ditch. I mean, older cameras can be a lot of fun to use. And still, the D700 image quality is very good. I mean, it has very good 12 megapixel resolution. And besides that, the D700 is also, I mean, it's nicer to use as a like dedicated photographic camera, because the D800 also has a video mode and some extra buttons and things for that, which I mean, I don't really use the video mode on the D800. I have much better video cameras for that. So yeah, I will still use both the D700 and the D800, but for different purposes, I suppose. As I said, the D800 is very nice for, let's say, landscape photos where you want a lot of detail and you don't need a lot of resolution. D700 is nicer to use. Well, in any case, I think this is enough for this video and this test. So thank you for watching, and see you in my next video. Bye!